Kenneth Copeland is another Word of Faith healer, book author, public speaker, musician, and Christian televangelist. Copeland promises the prosperity gospel, which advocates daily application of the Word of God from the Bible to name it and claim it. Name it and claim it is a tortured interpretation of Romans 10:13, which reads, "For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved." Copeland and other copycats tell their congregation to claim the promise from the Lord and it shall be done. This includes healing, exorcism, supernatural gifts, and the power to engage in battle against Satan. In order for this passage, written long ago by an unknown person, to actually work, you have to believe it. First, Copeland encourages his congregation to apply this method to virtually anything his flock needs, not just salvation. This may have contributed to the subprime mortgage disaster if Christians purchased homes on paper with no money to make the down payment or the increasing interest rates, which came later. Instead of practicing real economic management with real money, they abandoned the real world and embraced the supernatural world of make-believe. Copeland focuses on Bible passages that promote faith, love, healing, prosperity, and restoration, which is supported by his TV ministry, books, CDs, and DVDs. His religious motto is, "Jesus is Lord," meaning Jesus is the creator and ruler of the universe. Copeland was born in Lubbock, Texas, near an Army Air Force airfield, which inspired him to become a pilot. In 1967, he enrolled in Oral Roberts University and eventually fulfilled his dream of becoming a pilot and chauffeur for Oral Roberts. Kenneth and his wife Gloria, along with family members and friends, preached their message on God TV and Daystar television network, in addition to conferences and conventions worldwide, through a program they called the Believer's Voice of Victory. Not to be outdone by her husband, Gloria made the news in 2015 when she announced to her listeners that doctors give you poison that will only make you sicker, and that belief in her preaching is an alternative to medical treatment. All you have to do is let faith come into your heart. Gloria is not a member of the medical profession and offers promises and false hope in exchange for real money, which the Copelands spend lavishly on themselves. In 2007, Mike Huckabee, an ordained Baptist minister and 2008 Republican presidential primary candidate, paid Copeland Ministries to appear on Copeland's daily religious broadcast to promote his books and raise funds for his candidacy to a secular office. In 2015, comedian John Oliver criticized the Copelands for living in a $6.3 million mansion they claim was tax-free under the IRS parsonage allowance, and using church donations to purchase a $20 million jet used for trips to a ski ranch and a game ranch where the animals are hunted and killed for sport. In 2015, Kenneth Copeland Ministries was valued at $660 million by one online source, and personal wealth estimates range from $10 million to $26 million. The numbers are mostly guesswork with preachers, since they are not required to file tax returns or post their wealth online for public scrutiny. Our next liar for Jesus is Creflo Dollar Jr., another prosperity gospel preacher getting rich from supporters' donations that believe his pretentious nonsense. Born in 1962, Creflo attended public schools and was reared in the Baptist faith. In 1984, he graduated from West Georgia College with a Bachelor of Science degree. However, Creflo wasn't cut out to be a scientist. Instead, he found his calling in preaching the word to the Baptist community and collecting donations. Creflo's business skills and charismatic personality soon made him popular and then rich among believers, who first moved him from a cafeteria to a dedicated chapel, and finally in 1995 to an $18 million World Dome seating 8,500 people under the name World Changers Church International. By 2007, the World Changers reported around 30,000 members and 69 million in gross cash donations from 2006. Creflo speaks at conferences and writes about how he became rich, quoting the Bible to eager listeners. Creflo promotes the story of a Jewish Messiah claimed by his followers to be the son of the creator of the universe, who personally wrote his own story and inspired others to write down his dictation. According to the Hebrew God's own words, he had a son who was crucified, died, rose from the dead, and floated up into heaven, where he sits at the right hand of his Father, Yahweh. According to the World Changers' statements of faith, Jesus is the healer from illnesses caused by free will, which leads to sin and Satan's influence, even though his Father, who is all-powerful, can instantly cure all illness and human suffering by simply revoking the free will and stuffing Satan back into his box. Pastor Creflo knows better than to expose this logical fallacy when keeping a popular myth going among his delusional worshippers ensures his financial future. Creflo refuses to reveal his salary, but online sources report he owns multiple expensive homes, 2 Rolls Royces, and a new Gulfstream G650 jet costing $60 million. His business ministries received an F from Ministry Watch for declining to disclose how much in tax-free millions he receives from donations. Creflo owns Dollar Ministries, Arrow Records, and heads the Creflo Dollar Ministerial Association. His net worth is estimated at $27 million by Celebrity Net Worth website. Next is the man who started it all in America, Bill Graham. Probably the most famous evangelical Christian evangelist, William Franklin Graham, was ordained as a Southern Baptist minister and reached celebrity status in 1949 as a moderate conservative whose preaching appealed to middle-class conservative Protestants. He was an advisor to presidents and held large rallies, many of which were broadcast for 6 decades on radio and television. Graham helped solidify the fundamentalist worldview, which aided contemporary preachers in reaching more unconverted than ever before. According to his autobiography, Graham was converted to the Bible at age 16 after attending a series of revival meetings led by Mordecai Ham. After attending high school and Bob Jones College, Graham transferred to Florida Bible Institute, where he received his calling while playing golf at a local community club. Graham eventually graduated from Wheaton College and decided after much soul-searching to accept the Bible as the infallible word of the Hebrew God and launched his career as a Bible preacher. Although Graham had little formal training in theology, which is a study of the Christian God, his powerful, authoritative voice found favor with his listeners who attended his tent revivals and readers who followed him through the Hearst newspapers and national magazines. Graham conducted more than 400 crusades in 185 countries and territories on 6 continents since he began his ministry in 1947. He called them crusades after the Christian armies that captured and recaptured Jerusalem in the endless battle between Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Graham held a number of evangelical meetings on college campuses targeting young people. He organized a weekly radio program, television specials, a syndicated newspaper column, a magazine and a youth discipleship program, and a filmmaking and distribution company promoting Billy's religious beliefs. Graham liked to challenge his listeners to hand over their lives to Jesus, using a phrase William Borden had written in his Bible, who died on his way to a mission field in Egypt. No reserves, no retreat, no regrets. Graham has had personal audiences with many presidents who apparently valued his counsel, except Harry S. Truman, who had this to say about his 1950 meeting with Billy on his oral biography, plain speaking. But now we got just this one evangelist with Billy Graham, and he's gone off the beam. He's, well, I didn't want to say this, but he's one of those counterfeits I was telling you about. He claims he's a friend of all the presidents, but he was never a friend of mine when I was president. I just didn't go for people like that. All he's interested in is getting his name in the paper. In 1952, Graham conducted the first religious service on the steps of the Capitol building in Washington. In 1960, Graham met with Protestant ministers in Switzerland to discuss how to mobilize their congregations to defeat Kennedy, who was, hold on to your seat, a Catholic, and not a supporter of Billy's world domination crusade. According to PBS Frontline, he also organized a meeting of hundreds of Protestant ministers to pursue this agenda. Shortly after these efforts to defeat him, Kennedy gave a speech on separation of church and state in Houston, Texas, which relieved many voters of the fear that Kennedy's religion would play a role if he was elected. Some sources argue that Graham hated Kennedy because he did not want a Catholic in the White House. In 1974, Graham convened the International Congress on World Evangelization in Lausanne, Switzerland. Its purpose was to strengthen Billy Graham's vision of a global church for world evangelism. In 1979, Graham refused to join Jerry Falwell's moral majority, which actively sought to combine religion with politics by electing officials to public office who would pass laws based on the biblical values of the Christian right. Graham opposed segregation between whites and blacks and became close friends with Martin Luther King after bailing him out of jail during the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott. Later, they differed over segregationist Governor Price Daniels' introduction of Graham at a crusade in San Antonio, Texas in 1958, and King's opposition to U.S. intervention in the Vietnam War in 1963. In March 1991, Graham said, in reference to the Gulf War, "It is not the people of Iraq we are at war with, it is some of the people in that region." So far, so good. But then Graham says, pray for peace in the Middle East, a just peace. Who do you pray to for a just peace? According to Billy's preachments, God is in charge of human affairs and has his reasons for the wars that go beyond Billy's understanding. Graham also said that there comes a time when we have to fight for peace. Yes, we have to fight for peace. Praying to God doesn't work. Further on, he said that out of the war in the Gulf may come a new peace, and as suggested by President George H.W. Bush, a new world order. Graham was admired and rewarded for his work as God's servant on this planet. However, he hid a few of his deeply held beliefs that contradicted his public image. According to the 1972 Richard Nixon tapes, Billy and Dick both agreed that the Jews controlled the media and were synagogues of Satan, and had no idea how he, Billy, really felt about them. When the tapes were released to the public, Billy apologized and denied they represented his current views. It's possible Graham was unaware he was being recorded and decided not to criticize Nixon's anti-Semitism for the sake of friendship. This is supported by his longtime support of Israel and his refusal to call for the conversion of the Jews. Anti-Semitism is hostility, prejudice, or discrimination against an ethnic, religious group originating from the Israelites or Hebrews of the ancient Near East, whose way of life revolves around the Torah and the Tanakh, or the Hebrew Bible, which claims a covenant or agreement with their personal God, Yahweh, Jehovah, or Elohim by name. Anti-Semitism is aroused by canards from Christians that Jews killed Christ, or the fabricated Russian text published in 1903 with no known author called the Elders of Zion, claiming to describe a plot by the Jews to take over the world. In 1920, automaker Henry Ford paid for the printing of 500,000 copies of this plagiarized text to be distributed throughout the United States. Adolf Hitler was a major promoter of it in German classrooms as truth, after the Nazis came to power in 1933, despite its exposure as fraudulent by the London Times 12 years earlier. In 1968, Graham wrote to Nixon a letter encouraging him to order bombing of dikes across North Vietnam to destroy its economy and encourage North Vietnamese defectors to bomb and invade the North. Nixon's administration officials concluded the aerial bombing would kill an estimated 1 million North Vietnamese. In 1997, Graham was criticized for his naive ecumenism by fundamentalist Christians when he said in an interview that everybody is a member of the body of Christ, even those of other faiths or non-believers, if they have been called by God and are saved. They are going to be with us in heaven. This sounds like a departure from Graham's earlier biblical certainties. In 1970, Bill stated that the role of wife, mother, and homemaker was the destiny of real women according to the Judeo-Christian ethic, which is based on a tribal society living in the Sinai Desert 2,000 years ago. Billy Graham is perhaps the least dangerous of the Christian fundamentalists because of his willingness to apologize when he is wrong and his moderate attempts to bring people of all faiths together, especially as he grew old and weak. Unfortunately, as Bill Sr. suffered from Parkinson's disease and prostate cancer, his son Bill Jr. is busy counteracting his aging father's support of gay marriage, criticism of Mormonism as a cult, and voting Democrat for Obama. Billy Graham's personal wealth is not known. However, the richest.com website posted a figure of $25 million.